Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jane Scott with Metametrics. And in the chat room, when you have questions, you will get those answered by my colleague, Matt Copeland, and any other questions that come along that if he were to need to pull you into a room on the side, we can do that as well. But we'd like to take a minute and on behalf of Metametrics, extend our sincere appreciation to the assessment department there at the Department of Ed in Indiana. Dr. Charity Flores, your director, and Kelly Connolly, the senior assessment specialist, have worked with us to bring this to you today. And in fact, as we are getting started, I do believe Kelly is in the session with us today on the Lexile framework for reading. And I would invite her to unmute, say a few words, and kind of give us some housekeeping rules about where you can access this information once we are finished today. So Kelly, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me, Jane?
I can hear you, dear. Go right ahead.
Great. Hey, thanks again for everyone for being here today. Like Jane said, we've worked to put together this slide deck that will provide an overview of Lexile frameworks, or the Lexile framework, so that you have that knowledge base and everyone is calibrated on it. There is a question of where do we find the recording and the PowerPoint for this presentation. That will be something once complete and available, our office will communicate that to all CTCs through the CTC listserv. We send that out on Mondays. So once these materials become available to me, I will put those in a listserv message to all corporation test coordinators and make sure that those folks have it for distribution at the local level. Our website is currently on the brink of being updated, and once the dust is settled with regard to that refresh, then I'll also be sure to post these recordings and PowerPoints there as well, so that you can access those at your leisure from our website, and that'll be a wider distribution of sorts. But until then, I'll be sending this information through the CTC listserv. So look forward to that. Ask your CTC to send that your way. You can also contact us at the department if you're really eager and you can't get a hold of your CTC right away, but you'd really like to have this information at your fingertips. Send me a quick email. I'll be happy to send that to you once it's available to me, and we can do that directly. So that's the plan for distribution of the resources. Again, thanks so much for being here. If you have questions for me or for Metametrics, feel free to enter those into the chat box like Jane said, and we'll do our very best to help you out. So I'm gonna hand it back to Jane and Matt and let them take it away.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for working to set this up as well as being with us today. And on our title screen, you see my email address as well as Matt Copeland's email address. They will be in the chat field as well, and then even at the end of the PowerPoint. So we would love to hear from you after today. If questions come along, that is what our partnership is indeed all about, being here to help you implement the Lexile framework for reading. So a little bit of housekeeping on our side of things. Again, I've shared that Matt will be back there. The intent will be to keep everyone's sound muted and hope that that will keep distractions from coming in or people not being able to hear, what have you. And I am hoping that my dog will not see the UPS truck again, because she has a fit when she sees that vehicle go by. This working from home has brought on new challenges, and we certainly appreciate you giving up some of your summertime to join us today. So let's go ahead and get started. Where are you receiving the measures? And we will address both of these up front, because the Lexile framework for reading as well as the quantile framework for mathematics, those student measures are reported on your state assessment, the iLearn. We have linked both of our metrics to state assessments as well as norm referenced formative assessments, even reading and math programs, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But currently, over 45 million students are receiving Lexile and quantile measures in all 50 states. So this becomes a measure that as those students come in from other areas and are in your districts or your classrooms, start looking for a Lexile and or quantile measure to know where to pick up their instruction and continue right on. In the 2020-21 school year, it says that students will receive a Lexile and quantile measure on iLearn. And that indeed is our intent, and we're all looking forward for our school to turn back and look like what we're used to. But yes, the plans are currently 2020 and 2021 school year that iLearn in grades 3 through 8 will give you a Lexile measure for readability as well as a quantile measure of readiness on students. And as Kelly shared, your Department of Education website, yes indeed, is undergoing a facelift, if you will. And so these pieces of information that you might direct parents to, for example, they may move. If you go to look for these, Kelly did share that she would love for you to contact her if you are hunting for the Lexile and quantile overview on the Department of Ed website. She will gladly direct you to that if things change too drastically and you do have trouble finding these. On your website also, you will see a sample of the iLearn score report. And as you look at this and we blow out, if you will, the Lexile side of things, on that individual student score report, you get the Lexile measure that gives parents as well as educators an opportunity to see a child's growth throughout that school year from the work that may have been done. But you may also, during the school year, have access to what we refer to as one of our partner products, meaning these assessment entities, if you will, have reached out to Metametrics and they have wanted to put a Lexile measure at the core of a product that they sell out into the field. And so this really is merely a drop in the bucket, if you will, of those partner products that report a Lexile measure on a student or a benchmark assessment. And Matt has a link that I'm certain he will put out there in the chat field for you that shows you exactly where you could go to on our website to find a list of our partners if you're wondering if those things that you have access to in your building actually are reporting a Lexile measure. If you don't find them on our list, feel free to reach out to Matt or I, and we will do a little digging on your behalf to make certain that maybe it could be a very new partnership, because partners come into our family all the time, and we can double check that for you. Would be happy to do so. Then on the other side of the coin, we have partners that report a quantile measure of student readiness as well. And these are some of those, not all of them, but some of them. And so again, just like on the Lexile side, if you are using any of these products, and there are many more, you have that opportunity to benchmark a child's math growth throughout that school year. So let's get started. Let's dig a little deeper into the Lexile framework for reading to see how this data point that you're receiving on the iLearn, as well as possibly some of those partner products that you have access to see how you make this data point truly become actionable and help inform instruction. This screenshot, kind of puts everything right here in front of you in just an easy, quick look at exactly what we mean when we tell you that that Lexile framework for reading has two Lexile measures. Pete, there in the upper left-hand corner, he took a benchmark assessment. Maybe it was the iLearn at the end of year before last school year. And Pete was found to have a Lexile measure of a 480L. We know from our research and sending these two textbooks through our Lexile Analyzer that these texts have Lexile measures of text complexity at a 520L as well as a 420L for Rally for recycling. What this means is Pete has had text matched to him at an appropriate range that enables Pete to access the information without being frustrated or bored. The same thing goes with Caitlin, possibly a middle school student, and Marissa, possibly that high school student. So again, that's another feature to think about the Lexile framework for reading, that these measures can follow that child from elementary, middle, into high school. And we will see in some of the research we will talk about in our college and career readiness that those measures can follow that student on into life after high school. So simply, the Lexile framework allows all stakeholders to do several things. First, to link that reader to text, just like we discussed just a minute ago, to a common measure. That does enable an educator to forecast how well that child will comprehend the text that he or she is putting into a child's hands. This is a critical bullet. This is where that Lexile framework becomes so very valuable to educators across all content areas. It enables all educators to differentiate their instruction. No matter the subject that they teach or that they are responsible for there in the state, it enables teachers to put text into a child's hand where they are ready to read it so that you can hold them accountable for what they need to learn. So being able to differentiate instruction is critical. Now, because you have your Indiana online databases, and we're going to see those in just a few minutes as well. For example, a high school social studies teacher that may be starting a unit of study on World War I could simply go into these databases, find an article that front loads information on this unit of study on World War I at various Lexile measures of reading complexity, and could put it into the hands of students in his or her classroom and front load that background information that enables all students to have a hook of understanding prior to that unit of study even beginning, if you will. So differentiation does take on quite an importance across all content areas when you are matching that student to the text that they read and using it to help hold them accountable for the content that educators teach. The Lexile framework also allows educators to track a student's growth over time, but not just educators, actually. Even parents can follow along. That's why on the Indiana website that DOE makes available to you, there is actually a parent section so that parents can realize the importance of knowing that student Lexile measure and then being able to use that Lexile measure as they are helping that child possibly select text from a library when they open back up, or even from on-site digital libraries, if you will. And another place that the tracking of the growth over time that I saw firsthand, I'm in North Carolina, so thus this Southern accent that I'm dragging you through this afternoon. I taught for 31 years in the public schools here in North Carolina, and we also used the Lexile framework for reading. And we had a benchmark assessment. And in our elementary and middle schools, especially, when those students would take that benchmark assessment and see that their Lexile measure had improved over time, this instilled them and subtly let them know that the work that they were putting forth was working, because they saw their own Lexile measure of reader ability to increase. So these are important bullet points to think about as we go forward. So we'll drill down a little deeper, and I've already alluded to what the two types of Lexile measures are, but it always bears repeating again. In this particular screenshot, you will see the book on the left, Walk Two Moons. And once it was analyzed using the Lexile Analyzer, it was found to have a measure of text complexity at a 770 Lexile. Now on the right-hand side, we have this cute young lady, and she may have just taken iLearn, or maybe she took a benchmark assessment, and her Lexile measure was found to be at a 770L. This tells us that because of, yes, this perfect match example, this student will be able to read this book, Walk Two Moons, without being frustrated or bored. We are putting the text that they encounter on the very same scale as their reader ability. So speaking of putting them on that same scale, let's take a quick look, or a quick walk up the scale, if you will. So when you look at this graphic depiction of our Lexile scale, at the very bottom here, it looks as if we start at a 200L and we top out somewhere at a 1500L, plus or minus, if you will. But we have just completed recently the research into, and it was an extensive research project, if you will, into the beginning reader zone of text. And in our scale, text below that 200L represents the beginning reading materials, if you will. But yet our research took us below 0L. Any text that has a measure of 0L or below will have a code of BR in front of it, as you see here. And just like we think of 0 degrees on a thermometer, and the further away you get from 0 on that thermometer in the negative realm, the colder things are going to be. Same thing here. This BR, we would never talk to a parent about their child being at a negative 100L Lexile measure. So this BR, really in our professional conversation here, that BR is really replacing that negative sign, if you will. And obviously, the further they go below 0L, and we can go all the way to a BR 400, the further away they go from that 0L, the less of a reader they are yet. But we have measured text at that level as well. So if you think about those early readers, I think of the cloth books that infants are given sometimes, and there could just be an A and an apple on the opposite page. That really is reading when they are able to start thinking about that A stands for that first letter in the word apple. So the BR code is in front of a measure to indicate, yes, that is a minus sign. So what does it look like? The Lexile framework for reading, in this instance, the Very Wet Dog, has a measure of a beginning reader 180L, or BR 180L. And you can see with the selections of the text from this book that very high frequency words, if you will, very short sentences, very easily read words for the child that will be interested in this particular text. But our research, when we were digging into the beginning reader text zone, we were able to identify 4 indicators that would tell an educator a little bit more about the book, maybe where the difficulty level falls when they are selecting this book to use with a group of students. And in this particular instance, the Very Wet Dog is not impacted, or the complexity of the text is not impacted by those 4 indicators. But we'll take a look at yet a different one. Here's the book, I Need a Little Help. Walking Up, we're above 0L now, you'll notice, at a 150 Lexile measure. And when you go and do a book search in our Find a Book tool, which is located in the hub, and we do have a session coming up about the hub. You may have seen on the sheet of information that you found this particular workshop on. When you look at the Find a Book tool in the hub and you do a book search and you click on the cover, we are sending you, or you are going behind the scenes of that book to learn even more information. Now, in this screenshot, we give you a sample of the pages. We don't have that on our website so much, if you will, but this is more just for an illustration. So you can see, I need a little help. Will you help me read this news? Behind the scenes, you will find 2 tabs, a vocabulary tab and an indicator tab. When the vocabulary tab is highlighted, we are going to identify vocabulary words that impact the measure of complexity that you see on this text. On this instance, our analyzer, because that's what it's looking at, those words, has identified the words seat, shoes, and news. And then we will give you the part of speech and vocabulary there. But you see this other indicator, and when we open that tab, we have the indicators that are giving you information about the challenges in decoding vocabulary, sentences, and patterns that would impact a student reading this text. So a child that is having difficulty with decoding, this might be a pretty good book, because the decoding is not impacting the difficulty of this text so much as the vocabulary and sentence length might, as you can see here. So we have this information. When I say behind the scenes, I just mean you're going to click on that cover, go behind the scenes. So let's walk on up the scale. And here's an example of Frog and Toad are Friends. It comes in at a 400 Lexile measure of complexity. And you can see on the right, the sentences are a little longer, if you will, and maybe the vocabulary is getting a little bit more difficult. The word knocked is there, and blah. So you've got these types of features that you can look for when you are thinking about the complexity of the text. Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington goes into a 550L. The words may not be that difficult, except for the fact that since this was a walk around Washington, and they do mention the monuments and the buildings that would be seen during this journey, that would increase the Lexile measure of this text, because students aren't that familiar with seeing these words in print at the age that this book might be recommended for. Then we are above the point that we kind of mark as that line of demarcation when we did the research into the beginning reader zone of text. Once the Lexile analyzer had been calibrated to accept that text and identify those indicators, we then went back and we did remeasure text up to about 650 Lexile. And that really is where you primarily are going to have those chapter books, and where most of those indicators are going to impact text from 650 on. So that was kind of where we drew the line, if you will. So then when books are 650 and higher, you don't get the indicators like you do in the BR level of text that we just looked at. When you go and look up Harry Potter, the Chamber of Secrets, and you look at the 2 tabs, you have the Lexile and vocabulary by chapter tab. But for some of our books, we've done this extremely differently, if you will. That when you open a Lexile and vocabulary by chapter guide, you are going to get a look at the Lexile measure of complexity for each individual chapter. that becomes informative for an educator, most definitely, because then an educator can look down the list of Lexile measures by chapter here and determine which chapters, by looking at a roster of his or her students from a benchmark assessment and seeing that where those students in the classroom falls by their Lexile reader ability, and then look at the individual chapters to make a determination of which chapter those children are ready to engage with independently. So that becomes a piece of information. Not all of our books have the Lexile and vocabulary by chapter, but I think the other day when I was in our database, we're upwards of at least 1,800 plus. We have done this. This is a time-consuming activity by our text measurement department, I assure you. And over to the right, you have a sample of the text at a 940L. This is kind of what it just might look like. But then up here where we have the Lexile and vocabulary by chapter, we have that second tab, just like we've seen on these other books that we looked at that were lower, and we have indicators. And when you open the indicator tab in this particular book, the indicators now focus on two things: sentence length and word frequency. What is making this particular book at a 940 Lexile measure? It's simply that, and you can look from the example, those sentences are so long. So it does impact comprehension when those sentences in text do run so long. And so we give you that insight as well. Behind the scenes, again, just doing a quick check of find a book, looking up text, clicking on that book, going behind the scene to find if it's Lexile and vocabulary by chapter or what the indicators are, be it sentence length or word frequency. So we'll walk on up in the little higher areas of our scale. Here we have text at a 1280L, and you can look to the right and see what that text looks like. Obviously, that's not my summertime reading, and the Scarlet Letter would not be either at a 1420L. Again, we are giving you information for educators to make a determination about which text would be suited to use with which students by putting both that student and the text measures on this very same scale. And sometimes I think this is overkill. What does the Lexile text measure mean? Because we've been talking about it for the last several slides, but we'd like to drill it down, give you that single slide that points the way to exactly what the Lexile Analyzer measures when text is sent through for analysis. That Lexile measure of text complexity is telling you two things about the text. First, the syntactic complexity, or the number of the words per sentence. And secondly, the semantic difficulty, or the frequency in which the words appear in our corpus of text. And since our BR research was completed, we have truly exponentially grown our corpus of text that now numbers almost 1.5 billion words that we are tracking at any given time. So the characteristics that we are telling you when you see that Lexile measure on a text that you are thinking of using with a group of students, we are simply telling you the number of words per sentence and the frequency in which these words currently operate in our English language. But there are limitations. And oh my goodness, I'm a 5th grade teacher. And as a 5th grade teacher, I see in my book room when the world is spinning correctly again, and I get to go in the book room. In the book room, I see a box of a 6-pack set of books that at the end, it's got this big sticker that says, oh, they're $7.90L. I think I can use that with this small group that I'm getting ready to work with. And so I pull them down and go into my classroom and start handing them out because I've selected that book only by that Lexile measure. No, I don't think Catcher in the Rye needs to be in that fifth grade classroom. We set this slide up this way just to drive the point home that Lexile measure of text complexity is simply one thing that you know about the text. It can tell you a lot of things. It's going to tell you how difficult that text is, sentence length, word frequency. But yet we do rely on our educators knowing or selecting text because of what will drive their instruction. We rely on our educators to know what is age appropriate for the students that they may work with. Are you wanting text that has a good deal of text support? So we do rely on folks that are selecting text for students, and we encourage educators, please do not select text for students solely by their Lexile measure. We also want to encourage educators, please tell parents and students that text, when they are doing those self-selected reading opportunities, that text needs to be selected by their interest level first. And then as they're reading, if it's too difficult or if it's too easy, then maybe have them check that Lexile measure. But no, we have limitations because we are a text measurement department, or company, I should say. We are only assigning that Lexile measure based on sentence length and word frequency. And in this instance, the Catcher in the Rye, knowing that it's a 790L, would tell that high school educator that may have this book as a part of his or her curriculum that, oh, you know, I normally spend 2 weeks front-loading vocabulary because this is such a difficult read for my high school students. Maybe that's not necessary. Think about getting them into those literary elements quick, because that 790 for the Catcher in the Rye is telling you what? The sentences aren't that long and the vocabulary is not that difficult. Find a couple of those words that you think might cause a group of students to give pause, and then get them into looking at the conflicts and solutions and the plots and the characterizations and the themes and the setting. Get them into, just go ahead and get them into that. That 790 tells you you can. Many revered pieces of literature have a lower Lexile measure actually than you would expect. And we get lots of emails about, oh my goodness, what is wrong? Why does this book have such a low Lexile measure? Now you know what we're measuring when we assign that measure of text complexity. We also do not address what that student will be interested in, what the purpose is being set for a read of whatever piece of literature that's going into a classroom. And we don't know how much background knowledge that child's taking in. So again, Lexiles only measure text complexity. Input from readers, parents, teachers, and librarians is always necessary. So please do not select text just by that Lexile measure alone. And one of the reasons that we say this is that all three of these elements, the qualitative, the quantitative, and matching reader to text and the task at hand, all of these need to be considered when you are determining text complexity and the appropriateness of the text that you are selecting to use for deepening understanding in one of your units of study, or in deepening understanding in the content that you are required to teach. Now, lower left-hand corner, the quantitative side of this, that Lexile measure answers that 100 degree, but we do rely on educators to be aware of that qualitative as well as matching readers to the text so that it does indeed drive instruction forward, or that task that is at hand. So that's the Lexile measure of text complexity based on two things, two characteristics, the sentence length and the word frequency according to our corpus of text. So that's the one side of the coin, if you will. As I shared, the Lexile framework has two types of measures. We've looked at the text complexity measure. Let's now take a look at what does the Lexile reader measure indicate to you. We can paint this in a single screenshot as well. Here we have John, and John just took an assessment that reports Lexiles, and it was found that John's single Lexile measure is a 940L. We know that due to our research, the appropriate range where we're going to see the very most growth for a student is 150 point spread, if you will. So if you look here, here's the range, and that range is determined simply by thinking about 100 below to 50 above, 150 point spread. So here's the Lexile range from this single Lexile measure. I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. But John, with a 940L, again, in the land of perfect examples, John could go to the library or go online and find a digital version of The Old Man and the Sea, which also has a 940 Lexile measure. What our research has shown us over these years is that John can select this text and sit down and read it independently and have 75% comprehension at the end of that read. And you're thinking, but Jane, it seems that that comprehension level should be higher than that. Well, 75% comprehension is what we would call that just right place, so that we are giving them enough of a challenge to grow them as a reader, while at the very same time not overwhelming them with text at that level. So 75% comprehension, you'll see in a minute, we call it that just right spot. I think I've heard Dr. Malbert, one of the founders of our company, call that the sweet spot, if you will, because we are challenging them. If you think about only reading things that you're comprehending at a 95 to 100% accuracy each and every single time you are reading, you're not going to be introduced to new vocabulary words. You're not going to have access to sentences that would grow you as a reader, as it were. So let's take a look at that range for a minute. 940L is John's independent Lexile measure, but the range where John, the more often John is reading text within that range, the quicker we grow John. But I'd like for you to think about wrapping your hand around that 840 and the other hand around the 990. Think of that as a rubber band, and that range can be expanded. It could even become more narrow than a 150 point spread. Why? Because as the educator, and even John, knows more about what he's interested in reading about. And if you're going into a read with a high interest level, more than likely you can even handle a little bit higher Lexile level text. So think about that as like a rubber band, please, if you would. So why 75% comprehension? Drilling down into that, this is where, like I shared, they can be successful without being frustrated, without being bored. But this is also that place where they're going to have functional comprehension of the text. And very rarely in a classroom is a teacher just going to give students something to read and not have other activities that support the reading of that text. So you think about a student like John reading The Old Man and the Sea and coming away with 75% comprehension. Once that reading is completed, that teacher's probably going to have some class activities. Possibly John will be put into a group and turn and discuss maybe one of the chapters in that text. All of these activities would go to grow the comprehension of that text. They've got enough of what they need to now engage in activities that are centered around that text, which will ultimately increase the comprehension and understanding of the text. The third bullet is critical. This is where they will be sufficiently challenged. This is where they will be presented with vocabulary words that maybe they don't have a large degree of comfort in interacting, but because the text isn't too difficult, they would have the ability to pull the meaning of those vocabulary words from that text. And also being faced with sentence structure that they may not be 100% comfortable with, but that is a comfort zone that enables them to become used to facing text at that level. So that 75% is the right amount of challenge. And again, we shared that student Lexile measure that you would receive from a benchmark assessment or from the iLearn is that student's independent reading measure. Simply meaning, this is where that civics teacher or social studies teacher can start that unit on World War I and find articles and put them in the hands of a student within their particular Lexile range. And that student can read that article to create some background information before that unit of study on World War I is even begun. This is how you might introduce concepts to students where you can deepen their understanding. Cooperative learning takes on a whole new meaning when the students are actually able to read the text that they're going to turn and create that graphic order, complete that graphic organizer, if you will, discussing what they've read, if you will. And crucial that all students, equity becomes much easier to ensure when all students have access to the curriculum you're teaching, irregardless of their reader ability. And it truly would enable and does enable learners to take ownership of acquiring knowledge. So the components are rather simple. The Lexile Analyzer on the left is how text gets a Lexile measure. The linking technology on the right would be students engaging in an assessment that have been structured with the Lexile measure at its core, so that when they take this assessment, they get that reader ability. I always lose my cursor when I'm doing these. Well, we've talked a little bit about making this data point actionable, but after teaching for 31 years, this is what I feel becomes the most beneficial when we are putting that student on the very same scale with the text that they read and interact with. You can truly make this Lexile data point actionable. If you aren't aware that you in the state of Indiana have this awesome set of databases provided to you by the state, the Indiana State Library. You can see even in their logo, that's who would be making these available to you. They're paying those subscriptions. Inspire, there in Indiana, has a plethora, if you will, just a tremendous amount of resources that already come assigned a Lexile measure of complexity. Magazine articles, depending on the individual, because I can't get inside, but depending on the individual databases you have that access to, you may find entire text already assigned a Lexile measure. So teachers have these at their fingertips to use K-12 in all areas of the curriculum. So let's take a look. So here we are. This is the link, inspire.in.gov. And this circle up there that you see, databases A through Z, that is a really nice way to enter the databases so that you are looking at those databases that may be a collection of magazine articles, because there are databases in here that would just be a quick synopsis of books, and that's not going to do an educator any good in a classroom trying to find some articles to help support that new unit on World War I. I'll stick with that. So databases A to Z, you can see those databases. It'll give you a description of which one that consumer reports. It'd be a stretch to find something on World War I. If you do a search here on this opening page, you might actually, teachers sometimes tell us there's so much in these collections of databases by the state. We just don't have that kind of time. So doing a search here might be overwhelming, but if you can just start searching individual databases that would have the magazine articles or the information that has been compiled, it could just be literature type things. So maybe that social studies person is not interested in using that particular database. So we encourage folks to explore, inspire, because once you do a search, and this is a search from EBSCO Explorer. I think maybe the keyword search was photosynthesis, I believe. So I'm a high school biology teacher getting ready to start a unit on photosynthesis with my students. If I go to EBSCO Explorer, one of the databases you have access to, and do a keyword search up there, then once my results come back, I can put a check, and now the only thing that will be in front of me, and then of course you would search again, would be magazine articles. And the magazine articles are going to come to you with a Lexile measure assigned. So here I've got the high school biology teacher going to start my unit on the concept of photosynthesis. I've got an article to use in my high school class at a 560 Lexile measure of complexity. If I need that low, all the way up to a 1390, and there's probably, I've just got a sample of 4 here. There's probably even lower articles and even higher articles. But all of these are focused on that concept that I need to teach in my high school biology class of photosynthesis, so that I can give all of my students an opportunity to have some background knowledge before I start this unit of study. Now, as you, when you get this PowerPoint, please pay attention. The up there on that last slide where I did the databases A to Z, EBSCO Explorer indeed is one of the ones that you're going to be able to sort by magazine articles, so that educators can find articles at the varying Lexile measures, as I've done here. Then you'll see here a check was put in Mass Ultra, Metal Search Plus, Primary Search. These are the 3 databases within EBSCO Explorer that will give you magazines assigned to Lexile measure. Magazine articles assigned to Lexile measure. So that's just another way to filter, and that is probably what educators need the most help on, and the media specialists at schools can help your teachers do this. How to search without being overwhelmed. Now, within EBSCO Explorer, articles will come back. The HTML full text, all articles will have the HTML full text. Even some articles, the PDF can be saved over to the cloud, but HTML full text, these articles can be moved into Google Classroom and used with that resource. All of these can. HTML full text gives educators the opportunity to assign articles, and there's a read aloud program behind that scene. So a student that may not be reading at a 1390L, but this particular article on chlorophyll has some critical information, those children can put on a headphone and have it read aloud to them. So you have that capabilities. If you know various languages, these articles can be translated into numerous languages, but we will tell you, please know the language before you start playing with the translator, because it's just a machine translation, so be careful. We have to add that cautionary tale there. So this is how differentiation can happen with having that student on the Lexile scale as well as having articles on that very same scale or text on that very same scale. So that high school biology teacher can save a set of articles onto his or her computer, and each year when they get to this particular concept or what have you, they can open these articles up, print them out, assign them via Google Classroom. So once you start collecting a list of targeted text like this, text assigned to Lexile measure, put in the hands of students with the coordinating Lexile range, once you start compiling lists like this, you have the opportunity to differentiate for all students, and equity can truly begin to take hold, because that child that happens to be in that high school biology class reading somewhere around a 650L needs this article, but also that student reading at this high level, 1380, 1420, they need that level as well. So Inspire. Here's the 650 articles. They've got some little questions there at the bottom. Here's the 1420 article. Yes, they do look different, but if they're moved into Google Classroom, it's not that obvious, if you will. And so you save having to print things out and the like, and that's a cost-saving measure as well. And moving it digitally out to students like that is very easy. So access from home to get into Inspire, your online databases. Now I pulled this right off the Inspire website because different states allow you to access these databases differently. Here in North Carolina, our NC WiseOwl, we have to have a username and password still. Inspire should automatically recognize your GEOIP recognition is built in. I'm like so far over my head in terms of understanding how all of this works in the background. But also they do encourage you, if you have any issue accessing Inspire from home, to shoot them an email and give them an idea. And if you are friends with the school media specialist or with the district's media specialist librarian, whoever heads that up, they can tell you as well. So please keep in mind your Inspire resources. So thinking about using that Lexile student measure of readability and targeted text assigned to Lexile measure that we put into their hands appropriately. You can, as I've already shared, front load background knowledge. You can let students understand the expectations that they will be asked to recognize in fiction and nonfiction text. Grouping becomes critical. Text discussions. As a teacher in North Carolina here, I can remember the times that I would assign reading from a textbook, what have you, and I would have kids do the turn and talk. Well, I didn't pay a lot of attention to those children that textbook was too darn hard. They couldn't talk about a subject matter. They weren't able to read what I'd asked them to turn and talk about. So when you're putting text in a child's hands where they can read that text independently, they can talk about it now. They can deepen their comprehension by being able to turn and talk about it. And it does become a way for them to do some self-selecting of text. If something they have found that interests them, they decide that, this might be too hard. I wonder what the Lexile measure is, if you will. So it does inform student selection too, but we highly recommend students are asked to select text by their interest first. So you're using your Inspire databases, if you will, and that teacher that found some articles that were sent home or assigned to Google Classroom on World War I, or maybe that high school biology teacher assigned articles on that photosynthesis unit, then those students return, and you can use this graphic organizer to help front load background knowledge, where they are just going to tell the educator 3 things they've learned in the article, what were 2 things they were interested in and they want to know more about, 1 question they still have, and this research below there that there is virtual consensus that if we front load that background knowledge, comprehension will be improved. I think with this, working with the elementary science teacher, and she was sharing, said, you know, I did this. I started a unit on the solar system, and one of my little guys came back in after reading his article the next day, and he couldn't wait to come up and say, you know what? My article said we used to have 9 planets in the solar system. Now there's 8. I can't wait till we talk about what happened to that one that exploded. So you think about really getting their interest up and ready to go so that they all can engage, if you will. Literary elements. This is a sample graphic organizer that educators can use, and I think back to when I would ask students to identify for me, what's the climax in this story? Well, then talk about the rise in action or whatever. It's listed so many ways. And I can remember that I always would ask them to do that, but in text that I knew they weren't able to read without just simply decoding through the whole thing. They weren't able to actually identify literary elements because they were too busy decoding that text. So there's a website, it's called brownielocks.org, and where a teacher found these twisted folk tales, and what she did was run the folk tales through the Lexile analyzer to determine what the Lexile measure of those folk tales were. And in this instance, the folk tale Rumpelstiltskin came back at a 720 Lexile. And I understand the main character is Gladys. So just a short little folk tale that you are certain students could read this, internalize this, and then identify the literary elements so that once they are thrown into the grapes of wrath, they now understand what you're asking them to identify. So holding them accountable in text that's comfortable first, that they can read independently, will go an awful long way as they get on to the school year. Giving them articles at their independent Lexile measure gives students the opportunity to compare concepts across all content areas, if you will. And then we discovered early on that our at-risk readers did not have a good background on reading strategies. Where our good readers used them, they had them. So we did start doing instruction around those individual reading strategies, and ultimately giving them articles at their Lexile measure to be able to identify, in this instance, making an inference, putting what they knew and what came from the text together to walk away with even more understanding. So just a way to think about when we can put text in their hands to show them what we're holding them accountable for first, then they are going to come much closer to doing it when text becomes extremely difficult. So using targeted text assigned to Lexile measure, does help to nurture reading growth, and it does enable educators to differentiate their instruction across all subject areas. So in thinking about, again, making this data point actionable, there's so many examples, and we only have a little bit of time today, so forgive me if I go on and on. But another place that is so important is when we encourage our readers to do close reading so that they truly can understand how we break text apart. How do we dissect text? Because whenever, as adults, we're reading things, you know, I'm preaching to the choir, when we read things as adults that we aren't familiar with, we break it down, we dissect it. And that's exactly what close reading is meant for us to do. This kind of reared its head when I was in my very first week of college. I'll never forget it. I went to my English Lit class and had my college ruled composition book because I was in college. I could have one of those. And my English Lit teacher assigned us several chapters to read that night, and that there would be a pop quiz that next day. And then the rest of the class, we chatted about things that had nothing to do with the reading assignment. And I can remember getting back to my dorm, that tells you how old I am, and just crying because I had no idea. I had no idea how to break it down because my teachers had always told me the vocabulary words that would be difficult, told me the main idea of the story, told me what I needed to be looking for, took me through chapter by chapter, me and my class in high school. I had never been given that opportunity to understand how to dissect text. So close reading, using passages assigned a Lexile measure, placed into the hands of a child with that coordinating Lexile range, truly can be so beneficial. So these short passages that you might find from Inspire would enable that student to dive right in without that teacher having to do pre-reading activities. No need, because that educator using these articles from Inspire realizes that, oh, I'm putting text in their hand that they can read independently. So they can dive right in without a lot of pre-reading. And then that enables students to focus on the text. And if students are having to decode throughout something that they are reading, their comprehension is literally just so impacted. So they can focus on the text. They have a reason to reread because somebody hasn't done all the work for them. I had excellent high school teachers, and they felt very strongly wanting all their students to be successful. But sometimes it's tough, but we have to let those little chickens out of the nest a little bit, keep a string on them, and then pull them back in. So giving them the opportunity to read with a pencil in their hand, make notes in the margin, giving them the opportunity that they notice what's confusing to them, rather than a teacher pointing out, oh, this is going to be confusing, so let me tell you about it. But then having an opportunity to read a short passage independently and then turn and discuss it with someone that may have read that very same article, and to think about the truly in-depth discussions that then can occur. But having those short passages or magazine articles like we looked at from Inspire, and asking students to respond to text-dependent questions. Go back and show me where you found that answer, and to be able to do so because they've made some notes out in the margin, what have you. So using Lexile independent level text can make close reading happen seamlessly in a classroom. And close reading, back in your school buildings, if you will, English language arts folks often share that we can't do all this close reading you're asking us to do. We just can't do all this close reading. It takes away from all these long novels and the things that we are responsible to cover within our curriculum. Close reading, I know the content folks are going to shoot me, but close reading needs to be happening not just in English language arts. It needs to be happening in those social studies classrooms. Oh my goodness, doing close reading in science. So close reading needs to be spread over all content areas so that students understand how to dissect all types of text they're faced with. Now, you may be familiar with some of these links that are here. These are other partners of ours that provide text assigned a Lexile measure, searchable text, if you will. Many educators are familiar with News ELA or News Ella. I don't know what's proper. I need to find that out one day. But News ELA will prompt educators to subscribe to their service, if you will. You can use some of their resources up to a point. But a partner of ours that's very similar to News ELA is the Smithsonian Tween Tribune, and it is sponsored by the Smithsonian, the one we recognize. Everything is free. Teachers can set up a classroom account, assign articles through that account. Students can receive articles. These articles that they provide are written at 4 different Lexile measures, usually a high, and teachers can assign these. Students can take a quick little assessment for these articles, and Smithsonian even has a writing feature built in that teachers can ask after the student reads an article, answers questions to the articles, and then those answers are going to come back into that teacher's account. That student can be asked to write his or her opinion of that article or a position that was taken by someone. But when they do so, they have a place where they can write about what they've read, and it goes into the teacher's account. And then that teacher can have it published out close next to the article. Total privacy in terms of students having like a coded little name that the teacher setting up the account, those can be assigned by the program. And so students can realize that, oh my goodness, look, my writing had good thoughts, good sentence structure, what have you, and now it's posted online for my peers to see. So all of these provide resources in a number of ways, but Lexile measures are given to these tests that are added, and then teachers can access this very, very easily. And Matt will share when schools began shutting down and COVID reared its head, and we all pray that our worlds will start to turn a little bit more normally in the weeks, months ahead. I refuse to say years. We developed some COVID-19 resources, and these links are there, but you'll have the PowerPoint as well. So I'm certain Matt will be chatting that to you here in just a minute. So when we think about building reading skill through instruction, in order to grow readers and grow their reading skills, those things need to be considered again. We revisit these components. That educators need to always consider the ability of that reader, how complex is the text that that educator is using with that student, and then always measuring that instructional scaffolding. Not so much like the situation that I described when I was in high school and I had no idea how to dissect text, but that instructional scaffolding that can be tempered with a student to enable that child to be successful with particular text. That very often is, classroom text is that text, if you will, that a teacher can't water down. There is no way to get that watered down text to a child's hands. And that's kind of what it's about when we think about putting that student, that child's reading ability on the same scale with the text that they encounter so that they can be successful in any endeavor going forward. I don't ever remember going in and asking to purchase my child a 7th grade pair of shoes. So we've always sold text that way. We've always thought of text that way. And we're all educators. We know that that in the real world is just not how it works, that we are often faced with those readers that aren't quite ready for the world that they've been put into, or the classroom they've been put into. So one of the things that we want to share here is we're drawing close to the end of our time together. is that, and hopefully you will join us, and I'll have that information there at the end of our PowerPoint today. In the hub, we do have the opportunity for you to see how students can take what they're doing, pretty much K-12, if you will, and apply it to, are they going to graduate college and career ready according to what they want to be when they grow up? So let's take a look at that resource, if you will. Here at Metametrics, Dr. Malbert Smith, Dr. Jack Stenner, they are the founders of Metametrics, and those two men, Dr. Jack as well as Dr. Malbert, they were focused on text as it implied college and career readiness since before it was cool, if you will. And over the years, they've added to that research. And the research that we've seen after looking at collections of text that students will face once they graduate high school, be it going to a 2 or 4 year school, going into the military, or even going on into a career. We know that if they can graduate high school reading somewhere around a 1300 Lexile measure, they're going to be okay. In a perfect world, if we can get them there, they're going to be okay. They will be able to handle whatever they are faced with. We also can share that our research has shown that if they can handle mathematics somewhere around a 1350 quantile, and we're going to do our quantile session on Friday, I believe it is, for our Indiana friends, they'll be okay. They'll be able to handle whatever math. And we've taken it down. The research has drilled down to this finite level. And I think it's rather finite, if you will. A student wanting to grow up and follow mom or dad in their chosen career of becoming an electrician, we know by looking at the text they will face that to enter that career, they will need to be reading somewhere around a 1270 Lexile, and they will be required to do math somewhere around a 1045 quantile measure. And I believe that quantile level is somewhere around Algebra 1, I believe, if I remember correctly. Bill Daggett, a noted man in the field of education, I believe he's friends with Dr. Malbert. He used our Lexile analyzer to do a deeper investigation into clusters of text over the years to see what that Lexile reader range would be for these particular careers. There's an article here from the 10 Best Jobs for Millennials, U.S. News and World Report. We can tell you what that median text demand will be of these careers, if you will. And when I'm live with educators, folks go, gosh, my massage therapist has to be reading at a rather high Lexile measure. You think about the anatomy, what have you. But when you think about talking to students about what do you want to be? I want to become a software developer. Well, we know that when you enter that career, young man, young lady, the text you're going to face is somewhere around a 1370 L. So let's work together and get you ready to go there, if you will. So in the hub, and that session I think is next week, and we'll give you all the information about where you can find how to join us for those sessions as well if you don't already have it. But we have what we call the Lexile and Quantile Growth Planner within the hub, and you see this circle here, add, edit, measure, and we're not going to demonstrate this in the hub. We're doing it via screenshots because currently you do not have those Lexile measures and or quantile measures from iLearn for this year, so we felt that would be kind of a little misleading because this would require you to use those summative assessment measures. So add and edit measures. You click there when you open our growth planner. You then will make certain you put a check in all of these boxes, if you will. I have to find my. And then you would put your Lexile measure from the particular year that you're pulling that information from, and then select submit. What you receive now, and these measures came from the end of grade 6, the end of grade 7, if you will, end of grade 6, grade 7, that this child, here's the pathway, this green swath, if you will. This is going to be the same for all children. This is the pathway towards graduating college and career ready. And what we like to see is that that student's dotted line or estimated growth path remains pretty much placed in the center of that green swath, if you will. We can see here that that child kind of falls outside of the zone we want them in. And so, but we're realizing that looking at their Lexile measures at this point in middle school, we can start having those sidebar conversations. That's, you know what? We know that you want to be a computer programmer when you grow up. Gosh, and we looked at that website and we found that you need to be reading somewhere around a 1300 L. You know what? We can make that happen. And it becomes a situation where you can join in to the partnership of getting that child to be what he or she wants to be when they grow up. We certainly did not create the growth planners, which is fueled by our career database, which is another tool in the hub. We didn't want this to be a gotcha moment, if you will, but just a, hey, we can start working towards that end right now, because everything you're doing in class, these are your I learn Lexile measures. Has to do with what we're doing day to day, week to week, and so forth. So, but then we can take it that next step, add, edit, career. And when you do so, and I believe this, once we're here and we've gone into, I believe, science, health sciences, if you will, and we're going to zero in on dental hygienist. When you click here on dental hygienist, it takes you to this screen, and we can tell that young man or young lady that if they want to graduate after 14 years and become a dental hygienist, the reading that they will face when they enter that career somewhere between a 1390 to a 1470 L. So this is a great conversation starter for that guidance counselor in middle and high. For those CT folks back in districts to have at their fingertips to start having those types of conversations. And then we talk about how that particular career of their choice compares nationally. And then here they can take it to even that next level by selecting Indiana and the metropolitan statistical area. So as you see that in this instance, I went to Indianapolis. And once that is in there and you select search, we've included the regional data from Burning Glass, where we've partnered with those guys, so that that student that lives in the Indianapolis area now can see how that career compares nationally, but how it compares where he or she lives. So we invite you to get into that hub and explore it, if you will, because an awful lot of information is there for you. So this slide tells me we have arrived at the end of our time together, and we've left a few minutes for even more questions to come in behind the scenes there in chat, and I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to let me know if I need to address anything up front before moving on. But the dates are here. That quantile training will be Friday morning, this coming Friday morning, 8:30 to 10. Then next Thursday, the 23rd, at 9 o'clock, we are going to do a hub tour. And we really, if you intend, maybe you're ELA and you won't be joining us for math on Friday, or vice versa. Well, if you're math, you wouldn't be with me today, but never mind. Anyway, we encourage you to go ahead and create your account in the hub. Matt will shoot you out that link, and he also will shoot out some cautionary tales. The hub does not communicate very well with Internet Explorer, and the hub doesn't work really well on a phone. A tablet's okay, but a desktop and or a laptop make it so much easier. And we do ask you use your school district email address simply because you're a partner. You're an educator in one of our partner states, and you get all the bells and whistles free, and we don't want you paying anything for this, and you get that top premium level of admission into the hub and all of those tours and all of those tools, I'm sorry. So go ahead, give it a shot to create that account beforehand, and if you try to do so, and if you hit a stumbling block, we know autofill. Whenever yesterday was searching for shoes, and then darn it, I go to another website, I'm gonna get all these shoe commercials popping up. Autofill, however all that works. We know if you turn that off or disable it momentarily, that'll make getting the name of your state in, and you have to use the entire name and not the postal abbreviation. So go ahead and do that maybe prior to joining us. We also have some August sessions set up that I think Matt will be taking the lead with those, but we know that in the 1920 school year, there was an absence of having those I-Learn summative assessment measures. So the researchers at Metametrics, along with your researchers in Indiana Department of Ed, we're working to give educators a projected measure, if you will, to calculate where these students may fall on the Lexile and quantile scale as they enter this next school year, to give you folks an idea of where these folks are re-entering the new school year, because you have been a partner of Metametrics so long. So just like you saw in the growth planner, we are doing that projection. We can do that individually to give you some kind of a brief idea as to where these folks are going to fall for Lexiles and quantiles. And these sessions are going to explain those differences. And then again, we'll be online to answer any questions that may come along. And one other thing to think about going forward is that when you are looking at placing these students in text assigned a Lexile measure coordinated with their Lexile measure of reading ability, you're not lowering standards of rigor, as you know. You are increasing standards of rigor, as well as giving students the opportunity to understand the instruction going on, because you are able to front load some background knowledge and deepen understanding as that unit progresses. And then you also give them an opportunity to take ownership of their learning. The Lexile framework can also be used in those tier discussions for response to intervention, personalizing their learning, as we've pointed to several ways. One of the things that when I was teaching in North Carolina that we did is that, for example, that fourth grade teacher handed kids off to the fifth grade teacher, telling them exactly where they ended that school year, so that fifth grade teacher could pick up and keep on keeping on. And what we found was extremely beneficial is that elementary folks could pass those students off to the middle school teachers, and those middle school folks knew exactly where to pick up instruction, not just only with Lexiles, but once the quantile scale rolled out as well. So you truly have that vertical alignment that can occur in those vertical conversations, so that everyone's talking the same language. And you can use these measures to also inform parents of where their children are, to be able to talk to them quantitatively each and every year about the growth their children are seeing. And you're not having to change a lot of terms on them from one year to the other. So the benefits, we feel, are crucial. Every Monday and Friday, Matt and I also host office hours. If a question comes up, we certainly encourage you to use those email addresses down there at the bottom. Here's mine, there's Matt's. Or join us for office hours. We'd love to work with you then. So we're online every Monday every Friday, and that Zoom meeting will always get you live to usually both of us, sometimes maybe just one of us, but depending on what the schedules look like. So I turn this back over to you, Matt, as we have reached the end of our time together today to find out, are there things we need to revisit? Are there questions we need to answer? And Kelly, feel free, if you're still on, I don't have my chat open, but if you're still on with us, feel free to jump in, Kelly, and share anything else that maybe we have left off.
Oh, no, I think it went really well, Jane. Thanks so much for leading us through all of that. And thanks to Matt for working in the chat so well and so quickly for everyone. I just wanted to reiterate our thanks again for joining us, everyone. We are going to make sure that our presentation is equipped with closed captioning, and once that recording is available, I will take that link, that recording link, and the PowerPoint from Metametrics, and I will communicate that through the CTC listserv. That's one way I'm going to get it out to folks. And then once our website has been refreshed and the Lexile Quantile pages have been updated, that won't happen for a couple more weeks yet, unfortunately, but it's coming. And once it is updated, I will be posting all of these resources to the website as well, so you can access it. So it'll all be in one place. For now, we're going to communicate that information, those resources, to CTCs as we complete these live sessions, and pass that off to them. If you are unable to get in touch with your CTC to access that information, those materials, please feel free to send us an email at the department, and we'll be happy to forward those on to you and get that into your hands so that you can use it. So that right now is the best way that we have to get those materials to you, but we will get there. It's just that time of year when the website is getting its annual refresh, and it's not just me waiting for updates. It's a group effort. So anyway, we're in the queue to have those updates applied and our website refreshed. I don't want to mess that up at the moment. So we're just going to hold on to those resources until the website is refreshed and everything is updated for the new school year. And but in the meantime, we will get those resources out to you, and you're welcome to contact us to inquire, hey, is this ready? Is this available? And if they are, we'll definitely share those with you so that you have them. I just want to give another plug for the sessions that are coming up. We have one on, I believe today is Wednesday, I believe we have one on Friday for quantiles, the quantile framework. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to join us. And then I believe next week we have one that Jane explained was a tour of the hub. So feel free to join us for that one. And I think that's all I've got for right now. Jane,
And
I'm going to
Kelly,
hand it back to
I'm
you.
going to ask,
Sure.
I think I just stepped on you, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I sent Matt that flyer that you shared with me.
Oh,
Did
yes.
you post that?
Yes,
Matt, did
yes.
you post that flyer?
I think he
I
did.
did. I
Okay,
shared
great.
the flyer in the chat
Great.
window. It's there. If
Perfect.
anybody needs that, we could certainly share it again.
Sure.
Help me out with one question I just received in a private chat. I think there's some classroom teachers a little bit confused. Could you
Oh.
explain what CTC is, please?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry. A CTC. So the department has, or the Office of Assessment has a single point of contact for every school and every corporation and non-public school in Indiana. It's called a Corporation Test Coordinator. We call them a CTC for short. And so that person is, the CTC is the person who receives weekly assessment updates from our office. And so for iLearn, for example, when those recording and PowerPoint are ready to go out in a bundle, I will put that in the iLearn listserv, and that'll go out to the CTC. The CTC for every school, non-public school and public corporation in Indiana will receive that listserv message. And then one of their roles as a CTC, as a corporation test coordinator, is to disseminate that information to the folks in their corporation. So that's who that person is. My apologies for the acronym. It's just very commonplace in my world, but I'm glad that you asked. That's who that is.
So anything else on your side, Matt?
It looks like there was one more question I saw. Will we get a PD participation certificate? I think this person means a professional growth point. Usually there's a certificate for time toward the license renewal. I'm going to check on that to see if that is something that's available. That would be for the like an hour. It'd be like I think this one was like an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be equivalent to like 1.5 PGPs. I'm going to do some checking to see if this is something that we can count toward that. I would imagine so, but I will confirm. And then I will work with Metametrics to get your contact information from the list of attendees, so that everybody who was on for that full hour and a half would get those credits.
And I would suggest, if you are still on and in the chat and interested in getting, if it comes to be that you can get that contact hour to help you towards certification, if you would take a minute before leaving and include your email address. Zoom doesn't automatically capture those for us when you sign in to a Zoom meeting, but if you put it in the chat and we're still recording, you would, that would be the contact information we would need to turn over to Kelly and her world, so that you will get that credit. Okay, so add that email address, please, and we will send that chat, that information over to Kelly.
Great. Thank you, Jane.
Let's stay on a couple more minutes so folks can do that.
Yeah, by all means.
And one quick addition to that that Jane shared, folks, when you share that email address in the chat, please make sure you're chatting to everyone. If you chat it to one of us privately, it will not show up in the chat record. So please chat it to everyone and not one of the hosts privately, please.
Okay. So just to recap, we'll send out the recording and the PowerPoint for this session to CTCs through the CTC listserv, Corporation Test Coordinators. I'll send that out as soon as I have both from Metametrics. I have the PowerPoint, I just don't have the recording yet because it just happened. We'll also post, I will send those bundles out to the CTCs as they become available. So it's going to be more of a trickle at first in terms of making those available because these are happening live. And then eventually they will all be posted to our website once that website is refreshed. So just to give folks a sense of the timeline. Okay, and then I will take all of those email addresses that you just entered and are continuing to enter, and I will inquire. I don't think it'll be a problem to issue PGPs for this session, and if so, if it's definitely a doable step, then I will make sure that we'll get those processed for you. I don't have a specific timeline for when those would be sent out, so your patience would be appreciated there. And I hope that as you're signing off, that you're able to join us for the upcoming sessions as well.
And everyone, this is Matt again. Thank you all so much for joining us. I will say, I believe I have kept up with all of the questions asked in the chat. If by chance I missed one, please, I apologize. Please don't hesitate to send it to me again, and I'll be happy to follow up, or shoot me an email. I'll be around this afternoon and can reply to you there as well. But thank you all so much for giving up a little bit of your summer to join us. On behalf of everyone at Metametrics and at the Indiana Department of Education, thanks so much for your attendance today. Please reach out if you have any questions, if you need any clarifications. We're always here to help. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.